The great hall of the Galactic Council stretched out like a metal cathedral. Hundreds of seats rose in curved rows, each one filled with beings from across the galaxy. Some had scales that shimmered like oil on water. Others had skin made of living crystal that sang soft notes when they moved. A few looked almost like giant insects, their eyes reflecting the bright lights overhead. Ambassador Deho walked slowly down the center aisle. His simple black suit looked plain next to the fancy robes and armor worn by the other delegates. He carried only a small tablet and kept his face calm, even though he could feel thousands of alien eyes watching his every step. At the front of the hall sat the Council of 12. These were the most powerful military leaders in known space. Admiral Kethmore of the Valorian Empire dominated the center seat. His gray skin looked like stone, and his forearms were crossed in a way that showed he was not impressed. To his left, War Queen Vesic clicked her mandibles together. The sound echoed through the hall like breaking glass. On the right, Commander Zolthane's crystal body pulsed with slow, deep colors that meant he was thinking hard about something. Deho stopped at the speaker's platform and placed his hands on the smooth metal surface. He looked up at the council and waited. The hall grew quiet except for the soft humming of the translation devices. Humans of Earth, Admiral Kethmore's voice boomed through the speakers. You have requested membership in our defense alliance. You claim your species can contribute to the military might of the galaxy. Show us what you have brought. Deho touched his tablet, and the massive viewing screen behind him came to life. It showed empty space dotted with stars. Then slowly a ship appeared. The UES Taiguk moved into view like a gray whale swimming through dark water. It was big, certainly, but compared to the alien warships floating nearby, it looked almost small. The hull was smooth metal with no decorations. Simple weapon ports dotted the sides. At the front, a basic sensor array swept back and forth like the head of a searching animal. War Queen Vesic's clicking became faster, which Deho knew meant she was amused. Several other council members leaned forward in their seats, squinting at the screen as if they could not believe what they were seeing. This is your flagship? Commander Zolthane asked. His crystal voice rang like a bell. This is what humans consider a warship? The UES Taiguk represents our best military technology, Deho replied in a steady voice. She is 800 meters long and carries a crew of 1,500. More clicking came from War Queen Vesic. Admiral Kethmore's forearms uncrossed, and he leaned back in his chair. The gesture was universal among Valorians. It meant he was no longer taking something seriously. 800 meters, Admiral Kethmore repeated slowly. Our escort ships are larger than this. Our main battle cruisers are over 2 kilometers long. Some of our dreadnoughts stretch for 5 kilometers. We understand that size is not everything, Deho said carefully. This brought open laughter from several council members. A delegate from the Serpentine Collective hissed with mirth. Another being that looked like a walking tree swayed its branches in what passed for alien amusement. On the viewing screen, the camera moved closer to the human ship. The hull looked even more plain up close. Simple metal plates welded together, basic thruster arrays, standard-looking weapon mounts that held what appeared to be regular railguns and missile launchers. What manner of armor does this vessel carry? Asked General Thixola of the Armored Corps. Her shell gleamed under the lights as she spoke. Titanium steel composite with ceramic plating, Deho answered. Titanium? War Queen Vesic's clicking became so fast it sounded like rain on a metal roof. Our larvae are housed in stronger materials than titanium. And the weapons? Admiral Kethmore asked, though his tone suggested he already knew he would not be impressed. Magnetic accelerator cannons, guided missiles, and point defense systems, Deho said. Magnetic accelerators? Commander Zolthane's crystal body flashed, bright red, which meant he was shocked. We abandoned such primitive weapons 3 centuries ago. Our plasma lances can cut through a moon. Our quantum torpedoes can destroy matter at the atomic level. Surely this is some kind of joke, said Fleet Marshal Gorthak of the Steel Brotherhood. His metal body clanked as he shifted in his seat. Humans cannot seriously believe such outdated technology poses any threat to modern defenses, Deho remained calm, but inside his heart was beating faster. This was going exactly as Earth's leaders had predicted. The aliens saw only what they expected to see. They judged based on appearance and comparison to their own massive weapons. Perhaps, Admiral Kethmore said slowly, we should see this vessel in action. Surely the humans would not waste our time without some demonstration of capability. We would welcome the chance to show what the Teguk can do, Deho replied. War Queen Vesik's mandibles clacked together in what passed for laughter among her species. Very well. We shall arrange targets. Nothing too challenging, of course. We would not want to damage your warship. The viewing screen shifted to show the space around the council station. Several old hulks floated in the distance. These were decommissioned ships from various fleets, stripped of weapons and used for target practice. The smallest was a light cruiser about the same size as the human ship. The largest was an old Valorian battleship that stretched for nearly 2 kilometers. Standard testing protocol, Admiral Kethmore announced. Your vessel will engage these targets in order of difficulty. We will observe and evaluate your performance. Deho nodded. Captain Minho is ready to begin whenever you give the order. The screen, they could see the bridge of the human ship. Captain Minho sat in a simple chair at the center of a curved console arrangement. His crew moved around him with quiet efficiency. No one wore fancy uniforms or carried elaborate weapons. They looked like technicians more than warriors. Look at them, whispered Delegate Varmesh of the Psychic Collective to his neighbor. They appear to be operating some kind of industrial vessel, not a warship. I have seen cargo haulers with more impressive bridges, agreed the delegate from the Crystal Dominion. Captain Minho turned toward the camera as if he could hear their comments. His face showed no emotion as he spoke to someone off-screen. A woman in a simple blue uniform approached his chair and handed him a data pad. This was Chief Engineer Sora, though the aliens did not know her name or importance. The human captain appears to be consulting with his engineers, observed Admiral Kethmore. Perhaps they are having technical difficulties. More likely, they are trying to determine if their weapons can even penetrate the armor of a decommissioned ship. War Queen. Vesik clicked. On the bridge of the Teguk, Captain Minho handed the datapad back to Sora and nodded once. She moved to a console at the back of the bridge and began typing rapidly. Her fingers danced over controls that looked simple compared to the holographic displays used by other species. Target selection complete. Captain Minho's voice came through the speakers. Beginning engagement sequence. The human ship turned slowly toward the first target, a stripped-down escort vessel. Its weapons trained on the hulk with mechanical precision. In the council chamber, several delegates leaned forward in anticipation. This would be amusing at least. Admiral Kethmore checked his chronometer. Let us see how long it takes them to destroy a single unshielded target, he said to Commander Zolthane. I estimate 4 minutes minimum, the crystal being replied. Possibly longer if their targeting systems are as primitive as their armor. On the screen, the human ship fired its first shot. After 20 minutes of watching the human ship fire uselessly at the battleship target, several council members had stopped paying attention entirely. Delegate Varmesh was reading reports from his home system. General Thixola had started a quiet conversation with her aide about supply requisitions. Even Admiral Kethmore seemed more interested in his personal communication device than the demonstration. The Teguk had managed to create a few deep gouges in the battleship's armor, but nothing that would threaten the structure. Each magnetic accelerator round left a crater about the size of a dinner plate. At the current rate of progress, it would take hours to punch through to the ship's interior. Perhaps we should end this embarrassment, War Queen Vesik suggested to Admiral Kethmore. Her clicking had slowed to the rhythm she used when bored. The humans have proven they cannot handle real military targets. Give them a few more minutes, Admiral Kethmore replied without looking up from his device. I want to see how many shots they waste before giving up. On the bridge of the Teguk, Captain Minho seemed unaware of the growing disinterest from his audience. He continued to direct the attack with the same calm precision he had shown from the beginning. Each shot was carefully aimed and fired at exactly the right moment. Direct hit on target section 7, reported Tactical Officer Jamin. Minimal damage to structure. Continue firing, Captain Minho ordered. Maintain current firing pattern. First Officer Boram moved to a station near the back of the bridge and began monitoring alien communication channels. The translation software picked up fragments of conversation from the council chamber. She could hear the boredom and dismissal in their voices as they talked about other things. They are losing interest, she reported quietly to Captain Minho. Good, he replied without turning around. Let them get comfortable. In the engineering section, Dr. Kyung-soo watched the quantum cascade reactor climb toward 30% charge. The device hummed with increasing intensity, and the air around it shimmered like heat waves rising from hot pavement. Hye-jin worked at a nearby console, fine-tuning the field harmonics and monitoring safety systems. Core temperature is rising. As expected, she reported. All containment fields are stable. Excellent, Dr. Kyung-soo said. Begin Phase 2 preparations. Hye-jin's fingers moved over controls that looked simple, but controlled forces beyond anything the watching aliens could imagine. She activated secondary systems that had been built into the ship's structure itself. Throughout the Taeguk, hidden conduits began channeling exotic energy patterns. The ship's ordinary-looking hull concealed a network of quantum field generators and reality manipulation devices. On the viewing screen in the council chamber, the battle continued with predictable results. The human ship fired. The shots hit. The target. Small pieces of armor flew off and the battleship remained essentially undamaged. It was exactly what everyone expected from primitive human technology. I count 47 shots so far, observed Commander Zolthane. They have achieved perhaps 2% penetration of the outer armor layer. Their ammunition must be running low, suggested Fleet Marshal Gorthak. Standard magazine capacity for weapons that size would not support extended bombardment. Admiral Kethmore finally looked up from his device and focused on the demonstration again. Human ship, he called out. You have fired nearly 50 rounds with minimal effect. Perhaps it is time to admit that your weapons are insufficient for this target. Captain Minho's voice came back steady and calm. We are still within acceptable parameters for this engagement, requesting permission to continue. Permission granted, Admiral Kethmore said with a gesture that showed his amusement. Though I fear you will exhaust your ammunition before achieving meaningful damage. What the alien observers could not see was the careful coordination taking place throughout the human ship. Chief Engineer So-ra moved between stations, checking systems that had nothing to do with the conventional weapons being fired. Her teams worked on equipment that looked like standard power distribution panels but actually controlled something far more sophisticated. Dr. Kyung-soo received a communication from the bridge and nodded to himself. Captain Minho wants a status update, he told Hye-jin. What is our current readiness level? 42% and climbing, she replied. We could achieve minimum firing threshold in 15 minutes if needed. No, Dr. Kyung-soo said. We stick to the plan. Full charge only. We get one chance. To make this impression, and it must be perfect. On the bridge, Tactical Officer Jamin continued to call out hit confirmations as the magnetic accelerator cannons fired. Each shot was identical to the last, creating the illusion that the human weapons were limited to a single type of attack. The aliens watching had no idea that the ship carried weapon systems they had never seen or imagined. Another direct hit, Jamin reported. Target integrity remains at 96%. Captain Minho nodded, as if this was exactly what he expected. Maintain fire, all stations report status. Navigation ready, called the helmsman. Sensors operating normally, added the scanner operator. Weapon systems functioning within parameters, Jamin confirmed. To the aliens, this sounded like routine status checks from a crew doing their best with inadequate equipment. They had no way of knowing that weapon systems included technology that could rewrite the fundamental laws of physics. In the council chamber, more delegates were losing interest. Some had started conversations with neighbors about completely unrelated topics. Others were checking schedules or reviewing documents that had nothing to do with the demonstration. The consensus was clear. Humanity had nothing significant to offer. This is painful to watch, War Queen Vesic clicked to Commander Zolthane. They are trying so hard with such primitive tools. At least they are persistent, the crystal being replied. though persistence cannot overcome technological limitations. Ambassador Deho remained at his platform, still calm and patient. He had been watching the demonstration for nearly 30 minutes without showing any sign of concern about the apparent failure of human weapons. His confidence struck some observers as either admirable or delusional. On the viewing screen, the Teguk continued its methodical attack. Shot after shot struck the battleship target, each one creating a small crater or removing a piece of armor plating. The damage was accumulating slowly, but at the current rate, it would take hours to achieve a significant breach. 68 shots fired, Admiral Kethmore announced to the chamber. Total penetration achieved approximately 4% of outer armor layer. This brought chuckles from several delegates. The numbers spoke for themselves. Human weapons were clearly inadequate for serious military purposes. What they did not know was that every shot had been precisely calculated, not for maximum damage, but for maximum deception. The target locations, the timing, even the type of ammunition had been chosen to create exactly the impression they were seeing. The humans were not trying to destroy the battleship quickly. They were trying to look weak while they prepared something that would change everything. Deep in the ship's core, the quantum cascade reactor reached 50% charge. The hum was becoming more noticeable now, a sound that seemed to vibrate through dimensions beyond normal space. Dr. Kyung-soo checked his instruments and smiled slightly. Phase 3. Initialization, he ordered. Hee-jin activated new systems throughout the ship. Energy patterns that had been building slowly now began to accelerate. The Teguk's ordinary appearance concealed a transformation that was taking place on a quantum level. Reality itself was being prepared for manipulation. All field generators online, Hee-jin reported. Quantum cascade approaching critical harmonics. Excellent, Dr. Kyung-soo said. Signal the bridge. Tell Captain Minho we will be ready for Project Thunderclap in 18 minutes. On the bridge, Captain Minho received the message and nodded once. He looked at the viewing screen showing the barely damaged battleship target, then at his crew working with quiet efficiency around him. All stations, he announced. Prepare for final demonstration phase. The words meant nothing to the watching aliens, but to the crew of the Teguk, they meant everything was about to change. The magnetic accelerator cannon fired with a sharp crack that echoed through space. A metal slug the size of a small car shot toward the target at incredible speed. It hit the decommissioned escort ship dead center and punched through the hull, like paper. Pieces of metal spun away in all directions as the target broke apart. In the council chamber, a few delegates nodded with mild approval. The shot had been clean and accurate, but it was exactly what they expected from such basic weapons. Adequate, Admiral Kethmore said in a bored tone, though it took them nearly 30 seconds to aim. Our gunners could have made that shot in 10. Captain Minho's voice came through the speakers again. First target destroyed, moving to second target. The Teguk turned toward a larger hulk, this one a former heavy cruiser. Its thick armor plating had been designed to withstand serious punishment back when it was active. Now it floated dead in space, waiting to test human weapons. War Queen Vesik's clicking slowed to a steady rhythm. This should prove more interesting. That cruiser was built by the Iron Syndicate. Their armor is quite strong. On the bridge of the human ship, First Officer Boram leaned over to whisper something in Captain Minho's ear. The captain nodded and touched a control on his chair. The main screen showed the target growing larger as they approached. They are moving closer, observed Commander Zolthane. Perhaps their weapons lack range. Or accuracy, suggested General Teixola. Primitive targeting systems require closer engagement distances. The Teguk stopped about 2 kilometers from the target. This was much closer than most modern warships would need to be. Several council members exchanged knowing looks. These humans clearly did not understand proper space combat doctrine. Chief Engineer Sora moved between different stations on the bridge, checking readings and adjusting settings. Her movements were calm and precise, but the aliens watching could not understand what she was doing. To them, she looked like a technician trying to keep old equipment working. Engineering reports ready, Captain Minho announced. Engineering reports? War Queen Vesik's mandibles clicked faster. They need engineering approval to fire their weapons? How primitive is this system? The human ship fired 3 shots in quick succession. The magnetic accelerator round slammed into the cruiser's armor and penetrated, but the target did not break apart immediately. It took 2 more shots before the Hulk finally split in half and began tumbling away. 37 seconds for 5 shots. Admiral Kethmore calculated aloud, and they needed multiple hits to destroy a target with no shields or active defenses. This is worse than I thought. Delegate Varmesh of the Psychic Collective shook his elongated head. I have seen civilian mining ships with more effective weapons. Captain Minho seemed unaware of the criticism flowing through the council chamber. He turned to speak with someone off camera, then looked back at the viewing screen. Request permission to engage the battleship target, he said. A wave of amused chatter swept through the assembled delegates. The battleship was a massive Valorian dreadnought, over 2 kilometers long and built like a flying fortress. Even stripped of weapons and power, its armor was thick enough to stop most conventional attacks. Permission granted, Admiral Kethmore said, making no effort to hide his entertainment. Though perhaps you should call for additional ships to assist. That will not be necessary, Captain Minho replied. This brought open laughter from several council members. The idea that a single human ship could threaten a Valorian battleship, even a dead one, struck them as completely absurd. On the bridge of the Teguk, things were happening that the aliens could not see or understand. Deep in the ship's engineering section, Dr. Kyung-soo stood before a control panel that looked nothing like the simple displays on the bridge. This console was covered with complex readouts showing energy patterns and quantum field measurements. Symbols and numbers scrolled past in streams that would have made no sense to anyone watching. Quantum cascade reactor status? Dr. Kyung-soo asked his assistant, a young engineer named Hye-jin. Charging to 15%, she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Field containment is stable. All safety protocols are active. Dr. Kyung-soo nodded and made notes on his tablet. The reactor behind him hummed with a sound that seemed to come from somewhere beyond normal space. It was not loud, but it made the air itself feel different, as if reality was slightly bent around the device. Estimated time to full charge? He asked. At current rate, 47 minutes, Ye-jin answered. But we could push it faster if needed. No, Dr. Kyung-soo said, firmly. We follow the plan exactly. 47 minutes gives us time for the demonstration to build properly. On the bridge, Captain Minho was listening to a private communication channel. His expression did not change as he received updates from engineering. To the watching aliens, he appeared to be having routine conversations with his crew. The Teguk moved toward the battleship target with the same slow, steady approach they had used before. The massive hulk grew larger on the viewing screen until it filled most of the display. Its armor plating was scarred from decades of service, but the metal was still thick and strong. Look at the size difference. War Queen Vesik clicked to her neighbors. The human ship is like a small fish approaching a whale. They will need dozens of shots to even dent that armor, agreed Commander Zolthane. This could take hours. In the council chamber, some delegates were already losing interest. A few checked their personal devices or whispered to assistants about other matters. The human demonstration was proving to be exactly as boring as they had expected. Admiral Kethmore leaned back in his chair and crossed all 4 arms. Perhaps we should set a time limit, he suggested. We cannot spend all day watching humans peck away at that battleship. Ambassador Daeho remained standing at his platform, his hands folded behind his back. His face showed no concern about the comments flowing around him. He simply watched the screen and waited. On the bridge of the Teguk, Chief Engineer Sora approached Captain Minho's chair again. She carried another datapad, this one showing readings that pulsed with steady green lights. She leaned down to whisper something in his ear that made him nod slowly. What is the human captain waiting for? Asked General Tixola. Why has he not begun the attack? Perhaps they are having second thoughts, suggested Fleet Marshal Gorthak. Even they must realize how hopeless this is. The human ship moved into position about 3 kilometers from the battleship. This was farther than they had been for the previous targets, which puzzled some of the watching aliens. If their weapons were so weak, why were they moving farther away? Captain Minho touched a control and the ship's weapon systems came online. The magnetic accelerator cannons trained on the target with mechanical precision. Point defense systems activated and began scanning for threats that did not exist. Missile launchers opened their ports and loaded standard warheads. Beginning attack sequence, Captain Minho announced. The first shots struck the battleship's armor and left small craters in the metal. The rounds were powerful enough to penetrate civilian ships, but against military-grade plating they barely scratched the surface. More shots followed, each one hitting exactly where the captain aimed, but the cumulative damage was minimal. As expected, Admiral Kethmore said with satisfaction. They might be able to destroy that target eventually, but it would take them days of continuous fire. War Queen Vesik's clicking became rapid and amused. At this rate, the ammunition will run out before they break through the armor. What the aliens did not know was that the attack on the battleship was not meant to succeed. It was meant to be seen failing. Every shot that bounced harmlessly off the thick armor reinforced their belief that human weapons were primitive and ineffective. Every minute that passed without significant damage convinced them that humanity posed no real threat. Deep in the Teguk's engineering section, the quantum cascade reactor continued its steady charge cycle. Dr. Kyung-soo watched the energy levels, climb slowly but surely toward the point where Project Thunderclap would be ready. The real demonstration had not even begun yet. The conventional weapons fire stopped suddenly. After an hour of steady bombardment that had barely scratched the battleship's armor, the Teguk fell silent. The sudden quiet felt strange after the constant rhythm of magnetic accelerator rounds, striking their target. "Have they finally run out of ammunition?" War Queen Vesik asked, her mandibles clicking with amusement. Admiral Kethmore checked his displays. "The human ship appears to have ceased fire. Perhaps they have realized the futility of their efforts." On the bridge of the Teguk, Captain Minho sat perfectly still in his command chair. Around him his crew worked with focused intensity, but their actions were different now. Instead of firing controls and targeting systems, they were adjusting equipment that had no obvious purpose to outside observers. "Final target approaching," First Officer Boram announced. The viewing screen in the council chamber shifted to show something new. A massive structure was moving into position, dwarfing even the battleship they had been attacking. It was a Fortress-class defense platform, 3 kilometers long and designed to withstand the combined firepower of entire fleets. The artificial moon bristled with defensive systems that would have been active if this were a real battle. Shield generators capable of stopping planet-killing weapons, armor plating thick enough to survive direct hits from antimatter bombs, point defense networks that could track and destroy thousands of incoming missiles simultaneously. "The final test," Admiral Kethmore announced to the chamber. "This fortress represents the ultimate defensive challenge. It has withstood every weapon system we have developed. No single ship has ever been able to damage it significantly." Several delegates leaned forward with renewed interest. Even though the fortress was inactive and defenseless, it represented a scale of target that would challenge any military force. This would be interesting to watch, if only to see how badly the humans would fail. "Human ship," Admiral Kethmore called out. "This is your final target. A Fortress-class defense platform. We do not expect you to destroy it, merely to demonstrate your maximum offensive capability against a hardened target." Captain Minho's voice came back immediately. "Understood. Beginning final approach." The Teguk moved toward the massive fortress with the same steady pace it had maintained throughout the demonstration. But something was different now. The ship's movement seemed more purposeful, more focused. The crew on the bridge worked with an intensity that had not been there before. In the engineering section, Dr. Kyung-soo stood before the quantum cascade reactor as it reached 90% charge. The device no longer hummed. Instead, it produced a sound that was felt rather than heard, a vibration that seemed to come from the fabric of space itself. "All systems approaching optimal parameters," Hyojin reported. Her voice was tight with concentration as she monitored readings that would have been impossible for most species to understand. Quantum field coherence at maximum stability. Begin final alignment sequence, Dr. Kyung-soo ordered. Throughout the ship, hidden systems that had remained dormant for the entire demonstration suddenly came online. The Taeguk's simple appearance began to change as panels slid open to reveal equipment that looked nothing like conventional weapons. Strange geometries appeared on the hull, forming patterns that seemed to bend light around them. The aliens watching noticed the changes, but could not understand what they were seeing. To them, it looked like the human ship was deploying some kind of sensor array or communication device. What are those structures? Commander Zolthane asked, his crystal body pulsing with curious colors. They do not appear to be weapons. Probably some kind of scanning equipment, suggested General Thixola. Perhaps they intend to analyze the fortress before attacking. War Queen Vesik's clicking slowed to a thoughtful rhythm. The energy readings are unusual. My sensors detect power fluctuations unlike anything in our databases. Admiral Kethamore frowned at his own displays. The readings from the human ship were indeed strange, but they did not match any known weapon system. The energy levels were significant but not threatening by galactic standards. On the bridge of the Taeguk, Captain Minho received a final communication from engineering. Dr. Kyung-soo's voice was calm, but carried an undertone of barely controlled excitement. Captain, Project Thunderclap is ready. All systems are at full charge. We have achieved complete quantum field alignment. Understood, Captain Minho replied. All stations prepare for weapons release. He looked around the bridge at his crew. These men and women had trained for years to reach this moment. They knew they were about to demonstrate something that would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. Tactical Officer Jamin, Captain Minho said formally, you have permission to fire. Jamin's hand moved to a control that looked like a simple button, but this button was connected to technology that could manipulate the fundamental forces of reality. He took a deep breath and pressed down. Nothing seemed to happen at first. The human ship did not fire visible beams or launch missiles. There was no flash of energy or explosion of light. The Taeguk simply sat in space, apparently doing nothing while the massive fortress hung in the distance like a metal mountain. In the council chamber, confused murmurs began to spread. Delegates looked at their instruments and saw readings they could not interpret, energy patterns that made no sense according to their understanding of physics. What are they doing? War Queen Vesik demanded. I detect no weapons fire, no missile launch, no energy discharge. Admiral Kethmore was studying his displays with growing confusion. Unknown energy signature detected. Pattern does not match any known weapon system. For 10 seconds, nothing visible happened. The fortress hung in space exactly as it had before. The human ship maintained its position without moving. The watching aliens began to wonder if something had gone wrong with the human weapons. Then, reality itself began to change. It started as a small distortion near the fortress, like heat waves in space where no heat should exist. The distortion grew larger, spreading outward in a sphere that encompassed more and more of the massive structure. Where the sphere touched the fortress, something impossible happened. The metal simply ceased to exist, not vaporized, not blown apart, not reduced to atoms. It simply stopped being there, as if the universe had decided that particular piece of space should be empty instead. The effect spread faster now, consuming the 3-kilometer fortress like an invisible fire. Armor plating that could withstand antimatter bombs disappeared without a trace. Structural beams that had been forged from the strongest materials in the galaxy simply vanished. Defense systems capable of destroying entire fleets faded away, as if they had never existed. In 15 seconds, the massive fortress was completely gone. No debris field, no expanding cloud of vapor. No trace that anything had ever been there except empty space and distant stars. The council chamber fell absolutely silent. Admiral Kethmore stared at his displays, which showed readings that his instruments insisted could not be real. Commander. Zolthane's crystal body had turned completely white, a sign of total shock among his species. War Queen Vesic had stopped clicking entirely, her mandibles frozen in mid-motion. On the viewing screen, the Teguk hung motionless in space where the fortress had been moments before. The ship looked exactly as it had throughout the demonstration. Simple, unremarkable, and apparently harmless. Captain Minho's voice broke the silence. Target eliminated. Demonstration complete. The words echoed through the council chamber like thunder, but no one responded. Every delegate sat frozen, trying to process what they had just witnessed. The impossible had become real, and none of them knew how to react. In the engineering section of the Teguk, Dr. Kyung-soo was already shutting down the quantum cascade reactor. The device powered down with the same strange vibration it had produced during activation, as if space itself was settling back into its normal configuration. Project Thunderclap complete, he reported to the bridge. All systems nominal. No adverse effects detected. Hyejin was checking her instruments with shaking hands. Even though she had helped build the weapon, seeing it used still left her amazed. Reality distortion field has collapsed. Local spacetime has returned to baseline parameters. The demonstration was over, but its consequences were just beginning. The silence in the council chamber stretched on for nearly a full minute. Hundreds of the galaxy's most powerful military leaders sat motionless, staring at empty space where an indestructible fortress had existed moments before. Their instruments showed readings that violated everything they thought they knew about physics. Admiral Kethamore was the first to find his voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. What did you do? Ambassador Daeho stepped forward from his platform, his calm demeanor unchanged. We demonstrated our primary weapon system, he said simply. The quantum cascade cannon can manipulate reality at the subatomic level. Reality manipulation? Commander Zolthane's crystal body flickered through colors that had no name in any language. That is impossible. The fundamental forces cannot be altered. We have learned that the fundamental forces are more flexible than most species believe, Daeho replied. While others focused on building bigger guns and stronger shields, humanity chose to study the nature of existence itself. War Queen. Vesic's mandibles began clicking again, but the sound was different now. Not amused or bored, but rapid and nervous. You cannot simply make matter disappear. It violates the law of conservation of mass and energy. The matter was not destroyed, Daeho explained patiently. It was convinced to exist somewhere else. The quantum cascade field persuades reality to rearrange itself according to our specifications. General Thixola's shell had turned a pale color that indicated deep shock among her species. How long have you possessed this technology? We developed the theoretical framework 20 years ago, Daeho said. The working prototype has been operational for 5 years. The Teguk was the first ship equipped with a fully functional system. Admiral, Kethmore slowly stood up from his chair, all 4 arms trembling slightly. Do you understand what you have done? You have rendered every defense system in the galaxy obsolete. No shield can stop a weapon that ignores the laws of physics. Not ignores, Daeho corrected. Works with them in ways that others have not discovered. The laws of physics are the same. We simply understand them better. Fleet Marshal Gorthak's metal body clanked as he shifted nervously in his seat. How many ships carry this weapon? That information is classified, Daeho replied. But I can say that Earth's defense fleet is adequately equipped to protect our interests. The implications hit the delegates like a physical blow. If humanity had multiple ships with reality-altering weapons, then the balance of power in the galaxy had shifted dramatically in a single day. Fleets that had dominated space for centuries were suddenly vulnerable to a species they had dismissed as primitive. Commander Zolthane's crystalline voice rang with desperation. Surely you cannot use such weapons freely. The energy requirements must be enormous, the risks to local space-time stability. The energy requirements are manageable, Daeho said. As for stability, our scientists have conducted extensive testing. The quantum cascade field affects only the intended target area. Surrounding space remains unaltered. On the viewing screen, the Teguk was already beginning to move away from the area where the fortress had been. The ship's systems had returned to normal operation, and the strange geometric patterns on its hull were folding back into concealment. War Queen Vesic stood up abruptly, her 6 legs clicking against the floor. We demand access to this technology. The Chithari Empire has been an ally to many species. Surely we deserve to share in such discoveries. As do the Valorians, Admiral Kethmore added quickly. Our military cooperation agreements should include technology-sharing provisions. And the Crystal Dominion, Commander Zolthane chimed in. We have always promoted scientific advancement for the benefit of all. Deho listened to the demands with the same calm expression he had maintained throughout the demonstration. When the voices died down, he spoke quietly, but clearly. Humanity will consider technology-sharing agreements with species that demonstrate peaceful intentions and mutual respect. We are not interested in conquest or domination. We simply want to take our place as equals in the galactic community. The word equals struck the assembled delegates like lightning. Just hours before, they had been laughing at humanity's primitive technology. Now they were being told that humans considered themselves equals to species with thousands of years of advanced civilization. But the empty space where the fortress had been made it impossible to argue with that assessment. General Thixola spoke, carefully, her shell still pale with shock. What are humanity's intentions regarding existing territorial boundaries and trade agreements? We have no interest in changing current arrangements, Deho replied. Earth seeks only fair treatment in trade negotiations and respect for our territorial claims. We do not wish to threaten anyone who does not threaten us. Admiral Kethmore's 4 arms were now crossed in a gesture that indicated careful thought, rather than dismissal. And if someone were to threaten Earth's interests, then they would discover why we developed this technology in the first place, Deho said simply. The threat was delivered in such a matter-of-fact tone that it took a moment for its full impact to register. Humanity was not boasting or making empty promises. They were stating a simple fact: attack Earth and face weapons that could erase you from existence. On the bridge of the Taeguk, Captain Minho was receiving reports from all stations. The quantum cascade cannon had performed exactly as designed, with no damage to the ship or its crew. Dr. Kyung-soo confirmed that all systems had returned to standby mode and were ready for another use if needed. Well done, everyone, Captain, Minho announced to his crew. You have just changed the course of galactic history. Chief Engineer Sora smiled as she secured the reactor systems. Do you think they understand what this means? They will, Captain Minho replied, looking at the display showing the council station. It may take some time for the full implications to sink in, but they will understand. In the council chamber, delegates were beginning to grasp those implications. Species that had built their power on military might suddenly found themselves vulnerable to a technology they could not defend against. Trade relationships that had been based on strength would now need to be renegotiated. The entire structure of galactic politics was shifting. Commander Zolthane finally asked the question that everyone was thinking. How many other human innovations have we overlooked? What other capabilities do you possess that we know nothing about? Deho smiled slightly for the first time during the entire demonstration. Humanity has always been good at solving problems in unexpected ways. The quantum cascade cannon is just one example of what happens when we apply ourselves to a challenge. War Queen Vesic's clicking became rapid and agitated. You let us mock you. You allowed us to think you were weak and primitive. Why? Because underestimation is often humanity's greatest advantage, Deho replied. When people expect little from you, they are not prepared for what you can actually accomplish. The truth of those words was undeniable. For years, the galactic community had ignored humanity, dismissed their technology, and excluded them from important decisions. Now, those same species were faced with the reality that they had overlooked the development of the most powerful weapon ever created. Admiral Keithmore slowly sat back down, his posture indicating acceptance of a new reality. What happens now? Now we begin again, Deho said. Humanity requests formal membership in the Galactic Defense Alliance, with full voting rights and equal representation on all military planning committees. Granted, Admiral Kethmore said. Immediately. Several other delegates nodded agreement just as quickly. The vote that would have been debated for hours before the demonstration was now unanimous and immediate. We also proposed the establishment of a joint research initiative. Deho continued. Human scientists would be willing to share certain discoveries in exchange for access to other species' knowledge in compatible fields. The Crystal Dominion would be honored to participate, Commander Zolthane said eagerly, as would the Valorian Empire, Admiral Kethmore added. One by one, every major species represented in the council volunteered to join the research initiative. The same beings who had laughed at human technology were now desperate to learn its secrets. Ambassador Deho nodded politely to each offer, but his expression remained businesslike. Humanity will review all proposals and respond within 30 standard days. We appreciate your interest and look forward to productive relationships with all peaceful species. As the formal session ended and delegates began filing out of the chamber, the conversations were intense and worried. Fleet commanders were already planning to redesign their entire military strategies. Diplomats were calculating how to establish favorable relations with Earth. Scientists were wondering how many other impossible things humanity might have achieved. On the bridge of the Teguk, Captain Minho received a communication from Earth Command. Admiral Park's face appeared on the screen and she was smiling. Outstanding work, Captain, she said. The demonstration exceeded all expectations. How do you feel about becoming the most famous ship captain in galactic history? Captain Minho looked around at his crew, who were watching the conversation with pride and excitement. I feel like we accomplished our mission, Admiral.